Greetings, everybody. Amalia Natalio here with...
Susan Martin.
It's Susan and Amalia here to talk about disentanglement, which is our feel-good word for divorce. It's not a word that either of us has a real strong positive vibe about, but disentanglement feels a little bit better. So we are going to be talking about specific themes in the next few podcasts. This is our very first inaugural episode of the SoulGlow podcast, which is in honor of Susan and my SoulGlow retreat business that we have been working on for quite some time. And the pandemic of 2020 thwarted our first retreat, but we are going to come back strong in the fall. So, Susan, you want to open us up with our topic?
Yeah, so today we are discussing the topic of how do you know when it's really over? So That's a big one. That's basically, I think for me, I know for you, that was something that takes the longest amount of time to kind of really figure out.
Yeah, to figure it out, and then once you know, then actually following through on it. I think that is like, I guess really, now that we're talking about it, the two really fit together. It's how do you know when it's over, and then how do you follow through when you know that it's over? Because it can be really challenging. So for you, what did you do to kind of hone in on?
It took such a long time because you don't want it to be over. You know, you want to make excuses for why it can still work. For maybe it's me, you know, maybe I need to try harder. Maybe what can I do to fix it, you know, and being a healer, you know, and an empath and, you know, a lot of broken people are usually drawn to me, and I was broken myself for such a very long time. And so it's being that fixer, you know, I want to fix myself. I want to fix others. And instead of just realizing that you can't fix anybody, you can't help anybody, they have to help themselves, which was a lot of my journey too. So for me, it was, you know, you'd have a bad day. You'd have like, oh my gosh, it's over. You know, this argument just proved that it's never going to work. And then you might have 10 bad days, and then you have that one day where it's like, oh, he does love me. Oh, I do love him. Oh, we are working. Oh, you know, and then all of a sudden it gets brushed under the rug again, where you're like, no, it's okay. I think we can do this. And then you have to really be honest with yourself and realize, is this healthy for him or her? You know, is this healthy for me? Like, are there children involved? Like, how is this affecting other people in the household? Like, because it's really hard, I think, to have that honest conversation with yourself first, and then have that honest conversation with your partner. Because it's scary. It's scary, especially the longer you've been together. You know, it's the fear of starting over, you know, the fear of letting people down. And you don't want to hurt anybody. Like, no matter how bad the relationship is, you don't want to hurt that person, because for such a long time, that person was the most important person in your life. You know, in most cases, that person was your best friend. So there's so much, talking about that disentanglement word, there's so much to disentangle from. It's not just the romantic relationship. There could be, you know, businesses involved. There could be, you know, this friendship. There could be outside friends. Like, it's so much. So it finally got to the point I had to have the honest conversation with myself after months and months of working on myself, journaling, meditating, therapy, trying all the things that he asked me to, and that I also knew that I needed to work on, and it still didn't make it better. It still was so toxic on, you know, and I'm not blaming him. I'm not saying everything was him. He's a wonderful person, but it's just like sometimes two energies just don't work together. And after all of that, and still the bad times, the negative energy, the fighting outweighed the positive, it was finally time to be like, okay, maybe we need to start thinking about another avenue. Maybe this isn't going to be a forever thing. And I want him to be happy. I want to be happy. I want everybody involved to be in a positive place.
Yeah.
I don't know. How about for you?
That was a lot. Like, I'm just processing
Yeah,
all that you said. Like,
it was a lot. It took
holy
me so
cow.
long. I was in denial for such a long time, for
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Well, and I
And we
think,
didn't even have that, like, children together. I had a stepchild that I was very concerned about. So I know for you having, children, in the household, I feel like that even makes it harder to come
well,
to that conclusion.
yeah, I mean, I think that complicates matters for sure. I think it's difficult with kids or without kids just because it's such an emotional
So
decision,
true.
and it's likely in an emotional time, because if you sense something's wrong and you know something's wrong, it's got you off balance. You're feeling really unstable, you're feeling likely insecure, and you almost don't trust yourself to make the right decision, to make the
Mhm.
right choice. And it's a big choice. It's a big um, life altering,
Yeah,
like, oh my gosh, I mean, a huge decision. And it means easier almost to get into the marriage than to get out of it. Like, that's almost
totally.
almost a cakewalk. I know there's challenges with
Yeah.
that too. um, so I don't know, I'm not even really sure where to kind of latch on to your wagon train there of thoughts that you shared, because there's, like, you brought up so many good points about the getting to that point. So I guess I'll speak directly to my personal experience, which was, you know you're in this place. I didn't trust myself. I have a very keen guidance system that I rely on, but I didn't trust that guidance system because I felt like it was very much tainted with emotional, what is the word? Not toxicity, but emotional sludge. It was like making everything murky and move more slowly. And I was looking for a fast, quick fix. And there isn't one. I mean, if you are in the marriage and you're working on it, that is a road, to really take a look at a lot of aspects of yourself and the relationship. And so, that's certainly an option for people. That's certainly valuable. But I think, like you were saying, it really boils down to yourself. Um, you know, Everyone approaches decisions differently. So some people, really, it's very simple for them. Like, they're not feeling it, they can just rip the Band-Aid off and say, I'm done here. Some people need to feel into it. Some people, like you and myself included, looking for signs that everything is fine. Like, we know it's not fine. We know it's not good. But that one day that's like a glimmer of hope, that one day where it feels okay, you're like, oh, that's a sign. We're good. I don't need to make this life altering decision to end this marriage and move on and be alone. I can just stay right here. This is fine. This is good, until it's not. And then you're back where you started. And so I'm a list person. So I make
Me too.
lists. So it's like, okay, these are I would make lists of what I was really looking for. I would make a list of what he is doing, what he's not doing, what I'm doing, what I'm not doing. What do I want? What do I need? What of these little boxes that I have are being checked off by him? And again, that's probably one of the biggest problems, is you're looking for someone else to check the boxes. It's not about that person checking your boxes. You got to check your own freaking boxes. So I found that the lists were helpful in clarifying some things for me, but they weren't necessarily helpful in making the decision to ultimately leave.
Yeah.
It was a lot, like you said too, a lot of inner work, a
Mhm.
lot of time working on myself. I would highly recommend, if anyone is really in doubt about their relationship, that they find somebody to talk to or work with, because it's so much easier if you've got a neutral third party helping you navigate it. Like, you have friends, but your friends are going to be biased, and they're not necessarily going to be giving you neutral feedback. Some might, but it's still not quite the same as somebody coming in fresh. Um, and so I basically just trial and error came up with certain questions for myself, and I found resources from other people. And now that's a huge part of my karmic kindness business is really I've called a series of questions for people to ask about their relationship and about themselves, because it is a big decision that affects so many people around you. So ultimately for you, Susan, how did you decide that's it?
Well, I realized that for such a long time that I wasn't my own best friend. I wasn't like, I didn't love myself completely. And I think that's what is a challenge for a lot of people. So as my self-love grew and I did a lot more self-care and I started finding myself, becoming my own best friend, being okay with alone time, and being happier and more at peace, that's when it became easier for me to be honest with myself, because it was like these layers of gunk just like being shed of like the excuses and the fear, and a lot of that dissipated, and I was just faced with the truth, that life is short, and life is precious, and it's not meant to be miserable. I didn't want to make him miserable. I know no matter what, like for him and I, the love was never the issue. We still loved each other. It was just we didn't like each other anymore. And I think the like is very important in relationships as well. And we grew apart, and I was growing and he kind of was not, and that's okay. We all have our own paths. So it was just finally going on that journey. I was finally okay with having that conversation and being like, maybe we do need to start thinking about steps. At first it was like a separation. At first it was maybe we just need some time apart to see, but the universe presented that it wasn't just a temporary thing. It was going to be a permanent thing. But I would, recommend for anyone who's listening and going, or watching and going through this, relationships are hard. Like relationships are work. They shouldn't be too much work, but they're not super easy. It's a balance of both. And I would always recommend trying first. Like, I don't want people just to be like, oh, we got in a fight today, it's not working, it's over. It has to really hit rock bottom. It can't just be like your go-to can't just be like, okay, I'm done with this, I need to love myself. That's not what I think we're saying here. We're saying it's coming to that point. I would definitely still recommend, like we did couples therapy, I did individual therapy, I did all this other stuff. Like I feel like there's steps you need to go through to really try to make it work and understand the situation for what it is. And then once you get to the point where you're like, it's just, I don't like using the word better, but it's just not, you guys aren't growing together. It's not thriving. It's not beneficial for either one of you.
Mm-hmm.
Then it gets to the point where you're like, okay, I do have to love myself more. I do have to honor my path and listen to those guides, because as women, we have that extra layer of intuition on top of, the other two. So we have that feeling, it's there. We just don't want to believe it, because we want to love, we want to nurture, we want to help take care, we want to keep the peace. And, sometimes we can't keep the peace. We have to shake it up. We have to step outside of our comfort zone, for the sake of our own growth. for the sake of our family, the situation, the other person, and and it's very scary. And for us, it took months of, we lived together separated for a while, which was scary and toxic and emotional. And so it was months of uncoupling, or whatever you want to call it. And then moving out was tough, but as soon as we physically separated, I felt free. Like, I felt a weight had been lifted, and I could finally just focus on figuring out my path, my dreams, my goals, my next steps, which I think is super important. And it's never too late. You're never too old. It's never too late. Every day is a new day to become the person that you're meant to be, and the person you've always wanted to be. So a lot of people, I think, stay because they're like, oh, but I've been with him for 10 years, for 20 years. I don't know how to start over. I don't know what to do. And that's just the fear. And we can't act out of fear. We have to act out of love. And I think for me, it was finding that self-love that was super important. For me, I know you can also speak about that, that awkward phase of knowing it's not working, but still having to share space and operate in a kind and respectful manner. Being in the same area, it's tough.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we did the same thing. And that, that offers some benefits, but it does offer challenges. I think either way, whether you cohabitate for the period of time in your separation or you don't, there are challenges with either option. One thing I wanted to say about, you mentioned something about, leaving and about, self-love. Sometimes, there are times when leaving is loving. You're honoring that person, but most importantly, you're honoring yourself in knowing that it's time to go.
Yeah.
And, I think anyone who is questioning their relationship and wondering about it, there's likely something pretty significant going on within you to question it, and likely within the relationship. Now, that's not to say just because you're having these thoughts and feelings that the relationship is doomed. It's not what I'm saying. It is a sign, though, that if you don't address what's going on with you, the relationship will be doomed, because you are not going to come to a place of peace and comfort within yourself. So the relationship will never come to a place of peace and comfort either. So it really starts with you, where you are, and it's really getting clear on what's important to you. And when that voice is talking to you and that feeling is coming in where like there's something wrong, you've got to pay attention to it, because if you don't, the voice is going to get louder, and the situations and experiences you have are going to become more and more difficult to get your attention, to say, hey, hello, pay attention here. And I think that is probably the biggest takeaway I would have from that period of time is don't allow it to escalate to a point where it really effing sucks.
Yeah.
Before you take action. You don't have to get to suck. You can stay in uncomfortable and address it then, because it's just so much easier. And to talk about the kids for just a second, having kids involved, regardless of their age, I don't care if your kids are infants or your kids are in college. It makes no difference. They are going to feel it. They know. So if you think you're being like sly and you're able to keep it from them, you're not. They know. They can feel it. They can pick up on it. They may not know the details. They may not know how bad it is, if it's bad, but they know that there's something up.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from my personal experience with my kids, they would have much rather known than not known what was happening. Like they knew, but they didn't have it confirmed. And when I talked to them about it later, all of them said that they would have much preferred that we would have been honest about it than pretend like everything was fine when it wasn't.
Yeah.
So just a footnote for parents, if you think that you're doing a good job of protecting them,
That's
your
the
intent,
exact word, protecting.
yeah,
Protecting, yep.
your intentions are good. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's kind of a futile effort because they already know. So, I mean, I made a deal with my kids where from now on, I learned a lesson in that. I will be very honest with them about where I am in my life and what's going on. And I'm an open book. Ask me anything you want. You feeling a little uneasy about whatever, ask me. I'll answer you, and I will let you know what's happening. I'm not, now granted, my kids are older. So if your kids are like 7, you don't really want to go into the nitty gritty details if they're asking, obviously age appropriate answers.
Yeah.
But with mine, I mean, I could pretty much talk to any of them as if they were an adult. And I think if I show them that respect, there will be a mutual respect. And you can develop a really beautiful relationship with your kids if you allow them the same respect. It's not, as parents, we kind of have this idea of what I say goes. Well, yes, when it comes to safety, but you've got to allow your kids to fall on their face and pick themselves up because they need to learn that skill, and you need to, I guess it's not really a need. It feels better to let your kids kind of just be who they're meant to be and not kind of force them into a certain box. I think we do that with our partners too.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
look
Totally.
to them to fill a void within us, and it has nothing to do with them other than they're showing us where we are not loving ourselves, where we're not nurturing ourselves. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
That was a big journey of my relationship. Was I was looking for somebody on the outside to make me happy. I was looking for that outside source of completion, and nobody completes you. You have to complete yourself. You have to find happiness within yourself. Happiness is a choice and a self journey. And that partner is just supposed to be the icing on the cake. They're just supposed to be that little nice extra piece. They can't be a necessity. They can't be your everything. You have to be your everything. And that's, I think, sometimes, hard for some people to really take that, and go with it, that you have to find that within yourself. And,
well, that's because
there,
society has, our culture
yeah,
shows us over and over and over and over again with every happy ending, with every story, with everything where it ends with the man and the woman living happily ever after.
yeah,
And it's like, no, certainly you can have your happy time, but that doesn't mean it's a forever happy. And, and that's kind of, I think what your point is too, is that if what I call outsourcing your happiness to someone else, if that person disappears, because you don't know what's going to happen from one moment to the next. So that person's gone for whatever reason. And now you're there on your own. And now you're like, okay, I'm not happy because this person's gone.
yeah.
Like, talk about dependence.
Your identity.
And yeah, it's just, it's so disempowering. So disempowering for men and women. I don't think it matters what sex you are, having that sort of like need. And plus, I would imagine it doesn't feel good to the other person either, to feel like they are, it's like you're like clutching on to them.
Yeah.
This is like a visual of leech, like just attached.
It's like, yeah, that's totally, and that's, there's all different types of relationships, and, but it's, I think to really have a healthy, thriving relationship, you need to have your own identity. You need to have your, your own source of happiness. And you come together as equals, as partners, not because you need them, but because you want them. And, basically, I love what you're saying about disempowerment, because we give up our power very easily, letting other people affect how we feel about ourselves, our emotions, and that's on us if we give up our power. Like we
Mhm.
always have the ability to take our power back, but you know, certain situations can make us feel a little weaker or less than, and that's when you have to come back and find that strength and that passion and that fire and that drive within yourself. And it's not an easy process. I think it's definitely a roller coaster. It has ups and downs. You're going to have positive moments, have negative moments, but that's life. You know, life is a journey. It's about balance, like we talk about all the time, you and me
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
um and it's just knowing that the universe has your back, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't want to see you fail. It doesn't want to see you miserable, you know. And I like what you were saying about it's love, you know, the act of love with leaving, because
Mhm.
that's how it felt for me. Like I was finally like, I love myself. I love him. Like, and I feel like my presence is making him miserable and cutting him off from the next phase of his life. And I was like, out of love, I have to leave him. I have to let him go, so he can find his happiness, so he can grow and experience life in a different way without these negative patterns that we've been going over and over and over again.
Well,
And that's a heavy decision to do,
it
but
it is, yeah, for sure. You know, the other part of it too, I think for a lot of people is, okay, so if is there a catalyst? So is the relationship just not feeling good? Is there abuse? Is there infidelity? Is
yep.
there, like, I think in society, I have found anyway in my experiences that if there's something that you can point to, like,
Yeah.
oh well, he did X, well she did Y, well they really didn't get along, they were really fighting, then that led to this or that. Okay, it seems like there always needs to be a reason why your marriage ultimately fails. Okay, well, why? Like,
Yeah.
what difference does it make to your neighbor as to why your relationship isn't working
Yeah.
out? You know,
Yeah.
because then it's like everyone else is then all up in your business, and then it
Yeah.
becomes even more difficult because now you have everyone all up in your business.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes if the relationship is just not working, like if you've realized that you don't have anything in common anymore, that one person has, you know, grown into a different person than when you got together, like there's nothing you can really point to that is deemed like what I'm not even, not credible, but it's like it's not even, it's like not enough of a reason to end your marriage. And I think if one of the two people does not feel like they can be themselves fully and completely,
That's a
and you
perfect way
are,
of saying it.
and feeling like your light is being dimmed or your
Yes.
presence is dimming the other's light, then
Yes.
it's time to really, really take a very close look at the relationship. And there is nothing wrong with saying we have outgrown each other. Because if you can say that, if we can truly be honest with each other and say those words and say, I love you, but we are no longer working together in this day-to-day life
Mm-hmm.
situation, I think we would have a whole lot less divorces that are really angry and
Mm-hmm. And
stick it to
ugly.
ya
Yeah.
sort of vibe. It's just, it's,
Hurtful.
you know, and I think, you know, we're really indoctrinated into the belief that, you know, once you find your person, and you love them and you have kids and you do this and you do that, that you're together forever. And there's some sense of security for us for some reason in that, knowing that that's your person forever.
Yeah.
It's like you stake claim, like you plant your flag in the person. I mean, I don't know. Like, how does that feel to you? To me,
No,
that
that
feels,
resonates.
you know, like the thought of like, I mean, I remember when I was married, the thought of being with him for like the next like 50 years of my life, I felt like I was drowning. Like I was like, oh my gosh, like the same
Yeah.
person, that one person for the next 50 years. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And then, I think some people, to them, that's their Shangri-La.
Yeah. They're like, yes,
That's their dream. But
more power to you.
I would ask
Yeah.
them why.
Yeah.
Why
True.
is that your Shangri-La? Why does that feel good to you? I mean, I loved him. I still love him. Same with you. Like, he's a
Yeah.
good person. He's a
Yeah.
great dad. Overall, a good husband, but we were not working and there was a lot of other stuff going on. It's irrelevant in this particular conversation, but, um, you know, my moment of clarity, and I basically said it was over maybe half a dozen times before I actually really said it and meant it and really was like at peace with it, was when I looked at myself in the mirror one day and I did not recognize myself. I was like, I can't even describe what it was. It
Mhm.
was like I was just like fading away. It
Yep.
was like one of those movies where, like in Back to the Future, if anyone's seen that movie, where
Things are fading.
yeah,
They embrace the future or whatever.
yes, Marty's on stage and he's playing guitar,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden he can't play, and he looks, his hands disappearing, and like I
Mhm.
felt like I was
Yep.
disappearing in front of myself, and I literally was. Like, I was so stressed out. I lost so much weight. I had people asking me, are you sick? I mean, are you okay?
Yeah.
What's going on? Like,
Yeah.
genuinely concerned.
Yeah.
And when I looked at myself in the mirror and it looked like I could barely see the essence, the light of myself, I'm like, that's it. I'm out. I'm done. And I guess my message to people is, you don't have to wait until your light is almost out before you make that decision. It's,
Yes, please don't.
you know,
Don't.
yeah. Like,
That's exactly how it was for me. I felt like I wasn't myself anymore. Like I couldn't be myself. Like, I don't think he meant to, but I just always felt judged for being myself. So then I just dimmed my light and I went into this deep depression without even realizing it. It was like a functional depression,
mhm.
you know, and and I'm sure he felt the same way. Like he couldn't be himself either. Like we were just two people just like occupying a space like roommates and just angry all the time. And we were just fighting constantly, which is, another thing. But like you were saying about losing weight and your health, like for me, from the stress of everything, from the crying, the anxiety, I developed ulcerative colitis during the last year or so of our marriage, and before we separated. And that, I don't wish that on anybody. I don't wish your health deteriorating um, because of the stress. And for me, now having known that I have, the autoimmune, the ulcerative colitis now, and knowing that stress is a huge trigger for it, out of anything else, it makes sense. But I don't, I would, I just hope that anyone listening or watching just never has to get to that point where their health just deteriorates because they're trying to hold it together. Like, you don't have to have this major reason. It just it might be beneficial, it might be better for both parties involved to just love each other enough to let each other go, and for your own sanity, for your health. And that's the thing, when there is, if there is a big issue and you can't get past it, that's fine. Like, you tried and you move on. But if there isn't a big issue, it doesn't matter either. If you just know it isn't working and it's just changing who you are, it's hurting you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It's just the struggles that I went through. I would never wish that on anybody, and I'm not blaming him for it. It's my own. It happened because of how I was reacting and responding and holding on. So I'm not blaming anybody for what happened with my health and everything through that. But there wasn't a huge reason at first for me. Eventually, once we started having these conversations, it kind of, I did have an aha moment when we had always talked about maybe having children one day, because he had a son from a previous relationship. And I wanted to have children. And then all of a sudden, towards the end, he was like, I don't want any more children. One, I don't want any more children, period. And two, we don't have a healthy enough relationship to bring a child into, which was very wise of him, you know, because me being selfish, I still would have been like, let's have a child, you know, which would have been not fair for the child, you know. So having that was kind of the nail in the coffin when he was finally like, I don't want more children. Like we're talking about signs, you know, oh, I need to sign. It already wasn't feeling like I already wasn't myself. My health was deteriorating. I lost a bunch of weight too. It was just, and then having him say like something that I've always, not always, but something in the last 10 years, 5-10 years, I really was realizing I wanted to have children. And then to have him say that that's something that wasn't part of his future, that was it. That was like, okay, well, I want to have a family. So that was another catalyst for me. And talking about that for other people, you want to have a partner. You want to have somebody who you can grow through life together. You know, you can share things, and you're not going to always agree on everything. It's not perfect. It's not, you know, easy breezy all the time, but you want to have the same kind of goals and aspirations. It doesn't have to be all the same, but you don't want somebody who inhibits you from doing certain goals or, you know, accomplishing certain dreams and goals in your life. You know, like there's something about, I feel like, compromising, but you don't want to change yourself for another person. You know, I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people are like, well, I want kids and he doesn't, but I'll be okay. You know, just use that as an example. And there's so many other examples you can use. So you have to figure out the word I always use is like, oh, no, I can't think of it. Like what you're willing to be flexible on and what you're not willing to be flexible on, like deal breakers. What are the deal breakers? You know, what is super important to me in my life and my goals, and what is just you know, I can work with that. It's not like the most important thing, because life is short, life is precious. If there's certain things that mean a lot to you, you want to make sure you have a partner who appreciates those, who maybe doesn't have to love it the exact same way that you do, but you need to. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think what you're saying is respect. They need to respect, you know, it's a mutual respect. You respect them and where they are and where they would like their life to go, and same in the other direction. And, you know, if like you were talking about with your, I call it not anymore husbands.
I love
you know, with your not anymore husband, you know, you weren't feeling that. Same with me. You know, I was really expanding into myself. I was more tuned into who I was than ever in the entirety of our marriage. And I don't know that he liked that new person. And the new person was actually the real person. The person that he knew for all those years was this idealized version of what he wanted me to be, and that I allowed to be because that's what I thought was supposed to be. And when I started to change and shift, and now obviously his perception and his opinion may be very different. So I want to just preface that with, this is my take on it, is that, you know, when I was evolving and I was expanding my awareness of, you know, things outside of our little bubble of our relationship, I was excited about these things. I mean, I was just totally lit up talking about like really, you know, having that, your light shining, and he would dismiss it or laugh at it or really, honestly, what in some ways is worse is be completely indifferent. Like I would share a big win or something that happened that was so like, I mean, I was like on a cloud happy about it, and I would get cool.
Yep.
That's it. Cool.
You're like,
And it wasn't even like cool with like,
cool.
cool. Oh my God, man, that's so cool. It was literally the word cool, or that's good. No questions, no like, tell me more about it, no anything.
Like no
And
congrats or
nothing. And so I realized in those moments, you know, some of it I coughed up to or chalked up to. I don't know what the right phrase is. Well, that's just not what he can offer as a guy. I kind of just threw it in the guy category, like he's a guy category, which is completely unfair because I have many male friends who showed way more enthusiasm for some of these same things because I actually experimented. I'm kind of a nerd for anyone who knows me. Like I will do these little experiments and I'll like kind of see and test things out in a very like unscientific way. But I told a couple of my guy friends the same stories and they reacted totally differently. Now, their wives may have a different opinion about this, but for me, they were really enthusiastic. And I thought, okay, so it's not just men. It's just my guy. He is just not into this. And I remember one time there was something I was working on, the details don't even matter, where I felt like something I was doing was going to be super beneficial for one of our kids who was having a bit of a hard time with anxiety. And he literally laughed at me. And in that moment, I'll never forget it, standing in the kitchen. And I was like, wow, okay. You know, and I had a couple other times where that happened. And I thought, you know, this is not the relationship I envisioned for myself. This is not the kind of relationship that I feel like I can be myself in, that I can thrive in. It's not. And I don't think I'm benefiting him either. Like we are no longer working together in a way that is allowing the other person to grow, allowing the other person to just be who they are. And it's rippling out around us with our kids. And for me, that was one of the biggest things. Like I can take a lot, the mama bear protection thing for my kids. And I would caution mothers in a similar situation to be aware of that and to know that you're not helping your kids by taking every bullet for them. Because you're showing them that it's okay to not honor yourself. You're showing them it's okay to be disrespected. You're showing them it's okay to stay in a relationship that's not working and that's not supporting you to grow and to really bloom into the person that you're destined to be. And, you know, I think I have 3 boys and I have a daughter. And when I thought about my daughter and the role that I was playing in her perception of marriage and relationships, that was another piece of the puzzle for me. So like, if we're going to like, kind of like bring it on home and, you know, distill it down. I don't know, maybe we can, each of us could share a couple of little things that the listeners might benefit from. I would say, you know, really it's take a really honest and raw look at yourself, your relationship, and the legacy you're leaving for your kids if you have kids. What are you showing them? Because by your actions, regardless of the words that come out of your mouth, your actions, they're watching. The words they can ignore and they're paying attention. And so if there's a voice or this feeling in you that's saying something is not right, don't wait until the voice has now turned into a 2x4 and is hitting you in the head. Listen. And then get very clear on what it is that you truly, truly, truly would like in your life. And then take an action towards it. And if that action means you have a conversation, which is going to be difficult, bottom line, with your partner, and you say you need time, we need to have more time together to talk things through. Let's see if we're on the same page. It's also not about you taking control of the marriage and the situation. It's about you honoring yourself and honoring the other and coming together and saying, hey, how can we make this work? Or if you really, truly in your heart know this is not your person anymore, then honor them, truly honor them, and show them that you love them by being honest. That's probably, as I'm saying all of this, I'm realizing it's the honesty part. Being honest with yourself and be honest with them is literally the most loving and respectful thing you can do for both of you. And then the rest of it will fall into place.
Totally agree with that. I totally agree. The honesty is, being honest with yourself is very hard. And then once you have that honest conversation with yourself, it's scary to have that honest conversation with your partner. For me, I had a very similar awakening where I would share my dreams and goals. And I always got a negative reaction. Like, that's not going to work. You can't do that. You're not going to make any money. That's not going to succeed. You're living in a dream world. And for me, that was just so suppressing. And I finally had to be like, so are all my dreams ridiculous? Like, is this, am I crazy? And that's when I really started doubting myself. And that's when I had to have those honest conversations with myself. And, I did the same thing. I chucked it up to him I don't even know it's chucked it. I came up with the word. I don't even know what it is. I just made excuses that it was, that's just men, like you said. But, and he'd always told me I was never going to find that emotionally supportive or that mindful person. And like you said, that's not true. There's all types of men and women out there, and you can't put one person or one gender in a category. And, but you have to support yourself first. So for me, it was facing the fear. So I really recommend, if you're having these questions, taking some time, making sure you carve out alone time for yourself, to see how that feels. We should be doing that anyway, but sometimes it's hard with life and a job and kids and other responsibilities. But really make sure you have some alone time to reflect. And for me, journaling was a really big eye-opening experience, because I was writing down everything that I felt, getting it out, because it got to a point in my relationship where I couldn't even be honest about my feelings because it would just start a fight.
Yeah.
Really loud, horrible, toxic fighting. And it just got to the point where I would just bite my tongue all the time. So I felt like I wasn't even, my throat chakra was like, So the journaling was a huge stepping stone for me, to get that energy out, and then to reflect on it, I would put down what I wanted, from me, from a partner, from life. And then I got out emotionally things that were stuck energy, things that were bothering me, things that, I couldn't voice in real life. And so that was very, very healing. And then meditation, because of all the stress and my health and everything, I really dove into meditating daily. Even if I could only get 5 minutes in, 2 minutes in, I had that alone time where every day I was journaling and meditating, and it gave me that time to get to know myself, get the clarity that I needed so I could make more honest decisions. I could have that honest conversation with myself, with my guides, and that was really the first stepping stone for me. I think that was huge in my process. And because that also helped me kind of fall in love with myself, become my own best friend. So it took a lot of the fear away. It took a lot of that judgment that I had, and, you know, that need for his approval, or that need to stay, you know, all of that kind of went by the wayside, and the love grew. And when the self-love grows, the outward love grows. And then I just started realizing, like, instead of the anger towards him, it started become sympathy and understanding, and realizing that it wasn't just me struggling. It wasn't just me miserable. And like you said, having that honest conversation finally with him. And sometimes it's a few conversations. I know for us, it was multiple conversations. But choosing love and being like, I want you to be happy. I want to be happy. I love you. And that's the first step, I think, for me, at least.
Well, I feel, you know, as you were sharing all of that, I think one thing that was really striking me is in our conversation, we've shared a lot of things about how we felt in interactions with our not anymore husbands, but there were also, we played a role too. I think that's something that's super important to remember, is that when you're in a relationship, it's two people. And there's two perceptions, and there's two sets of individualized energies and dreams and desires. And if they, you know, coincide and they come together beautifully, then that's great. But when they're not, you're still playing a role. Like, I played a role in the end of my marriage. You played a role in the end of your marriage. You know, I read a book. I can't recall what the name of the book is off the top of my head, but it really struck a chord with me. And my mentor actually pointed this out to me, and I didn't quite get it, but now I do. And that is, we have this idea in our heads that somebody has to be to blame. Somebody has to be at fault. And even if it's divided, it's not divided equally. Okay. So it's like, well, he's really 60% to blame, and I will take the 40. This book talks about, which I can't recall the name of, talks about you are 100% responsible for you, and I am 100% responsible for me. So the end of this marriage is a full and total responsibility of each of us. It is not about blame. It is not about percentages, other than to say, I own 100% of my responsibility without pointing a finger at the other person. Now, not everyone can wrap their head around that. Not everyone can understand that. And you don't need your partner or spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend to agree with you. It doesn't even matter. It's not about them. It's about you. It's you taking responsibility for yourself, and you keeping your side of the street clean, doing everything that you can to honor yourself and the relationship, regardless of what the other person does, which I know is hard. But on the other side of it, you will look back on it and know that you did everything that you could do to stay in a loving place with that person, and that you did everything that you could do to honor the relationship. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what we're all looking to do. If, you know, we spent any time with anyone and created a life with him or her, it's, you know, there's beauty in that, and there is love there. And just because it didn't work out for your entire lifetime does not diminish or take away from that time together. And so if you're, I don't know, if you're feeling like if you feel like you're dishonoring the relationship by leaving the relationship, I would actually say turn that on its head and think about it from a perspective of, you're actually dishonoring the relationship and yourself by staying if you know it's not the right choice.
Yep. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So I don't know, that feels like a good place for us to wrap up for this episode. And then we've got tons more to share about the whole disentanglement process. So now that we know how to determine, at least have a sense of it's really over, what are we going to talk about next? Probably I don't know, about having that talk, the big talk,
Yeah.
and maybe that, and as well as the effects that your disentanglement have on the people around you. That's another big one.
Yes. That's a big one. Huge one.
Yeah.
All
So
process, all growing, all from love. It's you know, it's a process, but tapping into love is all we're doing.
it is, even when things don't feel loving sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Susan, I guess we're going to bid everyone adieu, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for joining Susan and Amalia on our first episode of
Woo! SoulGlow podcasts.
Yeah. All right. Bye everybody.
Bye.